Welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast. Thanks for joining us, everyone. My guest today is Matthew Krueger, an airsofter from Colorado, United States. He's a wealth of airsoft knowledge, and he has a variety of irons in the airsoft fire, so to speak. He's the owner of Big Red Airsoft LLC, a company that purveys all kinds of goods, but specializes really in the wizardry of HPA and high-end products. And Big Red Airsoft LLC has a mobile shop that goes to both local and not so local games and events as well. He's an expert at airsoft teching. He's an expert at HPA. He provides parts, he provides knowledge, and he's provided knowledge to people in need in our very own community, including Chaz, but also Pat, and as well as Matt, the Storm Wizard. And if that wasn't enough, Matt and the team he's on, Division Airsoft, are also heavily involved in game organization, including running a once-a-month game day at their local paintball field. And as far as I understand, it's some of the best airsoft that you can find in and around Denver. So those games are awesome, and I'm looking forward to talking about them. And I think it's really worth mentioning that Matt and the team he's on, they really are making positive shifts in the local airsoft culture, which is something that, as you all will know from listening to the podcast, is something that we really care about here on this channel, creating really positive airsoft community. So it's a real privilege, Matt, to have you on to talk to us. So thank you so much for being here today, man.
No problem. Thanks, Phil. Making me sound really good there.
Yeah, I know, man. But you know what? As we were, and like I was saying to you before we recorded, like you come highly recommended, and like we've got a lot of ground to cover. I think like there's a lot of stuff for us to talk about, and I'm just really excited to get into it. But thanks to a few of the community members in our community, so Chaz and Sam in particular, I've heard a fair amount about the airsoft scene in Colorado, and I'm really interested in actually one day going to Colorado to play airsoft, not because of the fields and the people there, but also the impact of like high altitude airsoft, which is something I've never really, coming from the East Coast at 0 meters of elevation, like it's not something I've ever experienced.
Let's just say I'm a bigger boy, but being up at elevation helps when we go to events and you're able to go down in elevation.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Hey, oof, I know doing the reverse. I would like to experience it for sure. I'm not sure how much I would enjoy it, but it'd make for good stories later on. So I was, just tell me a little bit about yourself. Like, how did you get into airsoft? Like, how did you discover airsoft, and sort of what was it for you that where you're like, okay, this is pretty neat. Like, I really want to check this out.
So I started airsoft. First experience was back in middle school. I had a buddy. His name was Alex. He said, "Hey man, we're gonna do an airsoft party at my house." And the time I was like, I had no clue what airsoft was. And He goes, "We got stuff you can borrow or you can go get your own." And I'm a little prideful individual. So I went to Walmart and picked up what was an Aftermath AK-47. Decently solid gun for $150. Worked well. We played around his house, which hindsight was probably not the smartest thing to do. We had iPro. We were shooting each other, having a good time. And then it never went anywhere for me after that. But then in college, was it junior to senior year, broke up with a girlfriend, down in the dumps, and my buddy Andrew, he goes by Sprocket, he's on Division. He went through and was like, "Hey man, you seem really down. Meet me at like 6 o'clock in the morning at my apartment." And I was like, "Okay." Showed up really early for college on a Saturday, and he's like, "Follow me." We went back to his room, and I was like, "Dude, this is weird, man. What are we doing?" And he opened up the door, and he was like, "That side of the bed is your stuff and this is my stuff." He goes, "Put it on, make sure it fits. We'll show you how it works. We'll plug the battery in when we get there. We're going to go play airsoft today." And fell in love that day, lost a couple of his magazines. So I ended up having to pay him for that. And it just started there and been going strong for 11, 12 years now, something like that.
Yeah. So. I mean, that's a while. Like, and for people who've just started playing, like airsoft is super exciting, I should say. But once you've been playing for 10 or 11 years, especially in a place where you have a bigger scene, at this point now that you're well and truly entrenched in the hobby, what is it that like keeps you coming back? Like what brings you the most enjoyment currently when you're playing airsoft?
For me, it's a combination of the guys I play with and the relationships you build. Just the the jibber jabber back and forth with people is always fun. Hearing what they did, especially knowing the teching side, finding out what they did, seeing if they got something to work that I didn't get to work. The other part is like the coaching side of it and helping new players get into it and develop. And
Mm-hmm.
I just really enjoy that. I've kind of gotten burned a little bit with gameplay of Weekend Warriors, hence why Division hosts with Big Red
Mm-hmm.
Airsoft. Um, and just trying to still find that position in the community that I can still do good and make things better.
Yeah, that resonates really strongly with me too, because we have a saying that I like from the East Coast that I use on the podcast all the time, which is that the rising tide lifts all boats. And like it's very much about helping people get better. Is helps everybody, not just you, not just them, but it just helps you grow that sort of community, and better players make you better too, because once they start schooling you, you got to up your game, right? Too. So it's
Yes.
reciprocal in that way. Yeah. And you talk about hosting games, and we're definitely going to talk about that in a little bit. But somewhere along the line, you do what some I'd say many airsofters sort of daydream about. Be like, oh man, I want to run my own airsoft business. Whether it's run a field or run a shop or whatever. And so you start. You take up the reins. And I'd love to know a little bit more about how Big Red Airsoft came to be. Like, what made you sort of make that switch? What prompted you, I guess, to decide to get into business?
It's kind of a little longer story, but we'll quicken it up a little bit if we can.
No,
I
we got
used to
lots of
help
time. Don't worry about that.
I used to help a buddy out at Kiowa Creek, which, if you ask anybody who's played there, that was the place to play in Colorado. It was roughly like 20 to 30 acres. It was creek bed in it. It had elevated plateau,
Mm-hmm.
such as like 6 or 7 feet above the creek elevation. It was fully wooded area. It was an old paintball field, so it had some stuff on it. They had old or the buildings were like chicken coops or like army barrack kind of things, where you had like a couple guys sleeping in it or whatever, and they
Okay.
brought them on the field and dropped them off. Uh, and it was really long and linear, which enabled the field to be chopped up into like 3 different segments, which was cool. You had one which was like shanty town kind of bit, and then one that was fully wooded, and then one that was like an Alamo sort of situation where you had one structure, and then you could encircle it and try to capture it that way. And then
Mm-hmm.
if you wanted to, we had games developed where you played like linearly through the entire area, and it was just different than everywhere else, I guess you'd kind of say. Um, so starting with there, working with the guy, he was having troubles getting it off the ground, and a big problem we had, which started it for me, was he didn't have BBs, and you can't run a field without the primary ammunition, would be my
Yeah.
understanding. So I got involved with him, and we were working, building the field, going out on weekdays and whatnot, meeting out there and picking up ground fall, like broken tree limbs and whatnot, and stacking them up to create artificial bunkers. And then people would bring out tires and stuff and create tire forts or tire walls, and clean up, do like weed whacking or mowing around the area to bring the grass level down. Just doing general field maintenance, working with him. And
Mm-hmm.
finally, it came to a point where is, hey, let me invest in this. And he told me, I don't want you to invest in my company. I don't want to give up part ownership yet. And that was like, okay, that took a different turn.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, came back 2 weeks later and I said, here's how this is going to go. It's been 2 months. You haven't figured out BBs. You told me you're working on it. Let me take over the store. And he goes, well, why? And I said, you're killing yourself here, man. You can't run a airsoft place without at least BBs and either batteries or some sort of place to charge people's batteries. Like they need
Yeah.
that, especially at a field. If you're going up in like the mountains, like some of the guys do here, it's a different type of airsoft, and you need to come completely prepared. But when you go to a local field, you're expected to be able to plug in somewhere and charge a battery, or be able to buy BBs if you run out. So I
Mm-hmm.
took that over, and that started his business, was his thing. And I started Big Red Airsoft at that point. It ironically was a birthday present for myself in 2019.
Yeah.
Filed my taxes, and then had my tax guy file for the business, and got that
Mm-hmm.
underway and started, and then hit other accounts. Polar Star, Wolverine Airsoft, Valken. I have a Amped account that I work with those guys on, and Nola Gay directly. And it just grew and grew and grew. I've got PTS now and working on a couple others, and Elite
Mm-hmm.
Force, just growing and developing the relationships. And the big factor for Big Red is that it's all about the experience for the player. So if you come out and it's your first time and it's not fun, you don't enjoy it, you're not going to want to come back. And for
Yeah,
me,
that's right.
that's the next generation of airsoft. And we need to not baby it, I guess you would say, but you need to encourage it, make it a positive experience. And that's a big factor of what is like part of the motto of Big Red is driving that. So getting into that, developed up to a store, developed the store is actually my house, which is where I'm at now. And then the mobile trailer is the big factor where I have multiple, what do you call them? Tool chests in there that have parts, pieces, used parts for if somebody's gun goes down and you're like, hey, I can't afford to fix it. Well, here, we've got a used hop-up unit. Let's throw that in there. Or we got a broken piston. Well, I've got a used one. Let's throw that in there. And it just, the overwhelming excitement that somebody gets when they're like, oh man, I can't pay for that. And you're like, well, it's used parts, man. Like, let's move on. Let's go play. That's part of the enjoyment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Drove all the way up one time to Wyoming, which is a 4-hour drive, 4.5 hours with the trailer. And we had a guy whose gun wasn't hopping. And we took it apart and found out that he didn't have a nub in his hop-up unit. So we fashioned one out of a pink eraser and put it in for him.
Yeah.
And it made his night. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And that for me made that entire trip worth it.
Yeah, I mean, you're touching, I think, on a very sensitive subject because that's something I've been experiencing myself right now. But that's a conversation for another day. But it's true, like, especially for someone who's just starting out. Like, if I go to the field, like I did, this weekend, it's like, oh, my gun's not hopping the way I want to. I'm very unlikely to never play airsoft again, right? Because I'm in it for like 16, 17 years, however long it's been. But someone, it's their second game and they just bought a gun and that's what they're getting. You're totally right. Like, that's crushing for some people, right? And typically, like, the market of people who are entering airsoft for the first time. Like, people enter airsoft at all ages, but the vast majority, right, are coming in at a really young age. How much disposable income do they have to fix their stuff? So you being able to be there and be like, hey, let me fix that for you. It's used parts. Let's move on. That's amazing. Like, to me, that is such good. I mean, it's funny because it's not, I was going to say it's good value, but like, it's really for the person, for you, like, it's like, not for you, but it's an investment. I guess it's a reverse investment in the community because that not only is that player more likely to stick around and play airsoft, but he or she is much more likely to come to you next time they also have a problem because of how they were treated the first time. And they have that trust, right? It's not just like, oh, I got free stuff. It's like, no, this guy really helped me. Right. And it's a cool feeling. I mean, we've experienced that in a variety of different ways when you help someone who has a gun that they think is broken. And it's like, no, man, just flick it on full auto and then flick it back to safe and you'll be okay. They go, oh my God, I thought it was broken. Right. So yeah, I totally feel that.
I was watching a previous podcast about that of yours, and Chaz, I think, is the one who brought it up. He showed a guy how to turn his hop up on, and it's night and day difference, and it's a whole different gun to them. It's great.
As long as you have a nub in there, right?
True.
So, I think that this is a really, it's a really good lesson for anybody who's listening, who's like, hey, how can I add value into doing stuff like this adds a lot of value in your community. But I'm curious, as I said before, I think a lot of airsofters sort of daydream about starting their own business, right? They're like, oh, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that. From your perspective, like, and I mean, it's, you started this 2019, so it's been a couple of years. What are some of the lessons that you've learned since starting Big Red Airsoft that you hadn't considered, or that are sort of like, wow, okay, I'm glad I've learned this now, that you think might not be so evident for people who are just starting out?
I would say a lesson I have learned that I was half privy to and not privy to is the initial investment. So after reading articles and whatnot about starting a business and looking back on it, most businesses don't see any profits or recognized profit until the 4th or 5th year of their business. Mm-hmm. And understanding why that is. The initial investment of having a store and a bunch of products available is the overhead you got to be able to invest in that. So you're not buying parts and pieces individually. You're sitting on product until people need it. And in airsoft, typically that's till the weekend, wherever I may roam, that's when they need BBs or grenades or smoke or something. So I may come up front and invest a few $1,000s in BBs and smoke, and then I have to sit on that until they're sold. And then once I get to a certain point, you get to redo that and invest again and then sit and wait. Now, when I say I wasn't necessarily privy to that, my big boy job very well takes care of me financially. So I'm able to pull money from that and invest in the company over and over and over again.
Right.
And it only took me two years and like 9 months to be profitable. to have like in recouped my initial investment. So that was actually
Hmm.
really nice. And then it was just, I'm going to keep putting money into this thing and keep having my inventory grow and grow and grow and be able to do these things. And that's where I'm at now. So
Yeah.
that would be one of the big things and lessons learned on that is it takes a lot more to get started than you would think.
Is there a particular thing, and I'm just curious, like I'm going off script for some of these, but I'm just thinking, like, is there a particular thing that, like an item or something that you picked up for sale that you thought you're like, oh yeah, people are gonna love this, or like, people are gonna clamor for this, and when you got it, it was kind of like, oh no, people totally didn't go for it, like it totally fell short of your expectations.
I'm trying to think. One main thing we did was the UGS stock from Polar Star. It's a
Hmm.
niche you have where people don't want the tank Reagan line detached from their gun. They want onboard air. Well, I went and invested in like 5 or 6 systems, and I currently still have 2 or 3 sitting in the trailer for the
Yeah.
past 3 years. They've been sitting. So that kind of lesson learned there. They're not
Yeah.
super expensive, but they're not cheap either. And to have them sitting there, yeah, it's one of those that rubs me the wrong way a little bit.
What about the reverse question now? Like, is there a thing that you picked up that you started carrying that you're like, yeah, whatever, and then suddenly like the demand for it was just like, whoa, people actually want this? Okay, fair enough. Like that really surprised you in that way.
It was the actual pyrotechnic EG67s. The smoke,
Oh yeah.
not so much, but the actual pyrotechnic grenades and what I can do with those and the difference they make, it spread really quickly around the milsim community here that Big Red supplies those and does a great job of them. I originally had, 3 boxes, so a total of 150 grenades, and sold them out for the first event that I had, and then had everybody and their brother hitting me up asking about them. So turned around and spent everything I had saved up at the time was like $4,500 on pyro. It was very depressing what came in for $4,500. I was like,
Yeah.
uh, it was a pallet size. It was a total of 12 boxes. And I have since gone through those and placed 2 other orders since then. So that's a
Wow.
surprising factor is pyro is a big deal at Milsims.
Yeah, and I don't know if you know this, but like pyro grenades are not legal in Canada. We're not allowed to use them. So the stores don't carry them. We can use the Enola Gay, like the smoke grenades,
Mm-hmm.
or smoke emitters. I really should say they are legal, but like any of the pyrotechnic, like the EG67s are not legal. So that being said, in Q1 of 2024, I'm coming down to Perry, Georgia for Iron Horse. And Chaz and a bunch of the other people in the community are going to be coming, and I'm going to be throwing like as many grenades as I can afford because it's going to be a once in a life. So maybe I'll just say to Chaz, it's like, can you talk to Matt at Big Red and hook us up with, I don't know, like conservatively 15 boxes? I don't know how many that is, but I'm throwing every single one of them. Like I'm going to be thrown out because like yeah, one of our teammates is coming down with us too, and we're very much looking forward to being able to throw a little bit of pyro around at an airsoft game. That's for sure.
That leads us to our first Copperhead experience as division. Everyone was so gung ho, let's go play. We're stacked, we're ready to go, and they were like, first wave, you
Yeah.
guys are deployed. Well, we were third wave, so first wave deployed, second wave deployed, and then third wave deployed, and we finally got there. We sprinted to the first house that we were like, and we're like, we're gonna breach this thing, we're gonna breach it. Frag out, frag out, frag out, frag out. They end up pausing the game because we caught some linoleum on fire in the house with all the pyro and we put the game on pause for about 10 seconds, got it taken care of, and then regamed on. And me and the LMG gunner we had were walking up, and we were like, please don't be us. Please don't be us. It's us.
Oh my god.
So,
Yeah.
good memories. Good
Yeah.
memories.
Yeah, for sure. Well, actually, and this is a good segue to the next thing I want to talk about. I think, well, you and your teammates that you're talking about, Division Airsoft, in speaking with Chaz and sort of getting ready for the episode, one of the things that I've learned is that you're sort of working your way up the cadre, let's call it, of American Milsim games, particularly on the UFS side, and what that incorporates is taking on platoon leader roles and some other positions, and so I'm just curious, like, what has that been like? What is can we get into like your Milsim experiences, like good and bad, like the stuff that you've done for sure, but also segueing into what is leadership at those events like for you has been for you guys too.
So for me personally, I've done the squad leader role, and then we have one guy who has actually been a platoon leader before. Soon he's supposed to be a combat controller, so a guy who kind of roams around and directs missions and things like that. Um,
Hmm.
he put me up and told them that I'd be up for doing a platoon leader role, and I actually got reached out to through him for that, and I turned them down because I'm going as the squad leader for division at 1861 and at Reindeer Games coming up at the end of the
Hmm.
year. Um, and me personally, I guess, is more for me. The higher you go up in leadership at an event, the less you are involved in actually playing, and the more you are about the sequencing of the game and making sure those guys enjoy their experience. Because you turn around and look
Hmm.
at it, you're paying $250 for a ticket to go to this place, and the travel expense, and the work and tuning on your replica and your kit, and you're paying for the
Hmm.
BBs and the pyro. I mean, you're going to an event, it's going to cost you well in the neighborhood of it can up to $1,000 kind of bit. Um,
Hmm.
Local events like 1861 are much cheaper because we don't have pyro at them. It's in our backyard. It's like 45 minutes away from where I'm currently at. Um, but going into those leadership roles is less involved in the playing and the shooting and the breaching of houses or the running across the open clearing or zigzagging through the forest. It's more about making sure those guys have a good time and that they're effective in the game would be my
Hmm.
my stance on it.
So looking at your role more as a squad leader is more about it. Uh, I guess it's you're still doing the cool guy stuff, and like you were saying, like the further away you are from it, the less of that stuff you do, right? You're not working for a living, so to speak, right?
Right.
But so what has that been like for you? Like, what is your experience as a squad leader? Because I think there's I would, from my perspective, not having done an event like that, my vision of what a squad leader looks like is this like grizzled guy who's done like 15 milsim events, who knows everything about everything and is just like barking orders and telling people where to go and has just got it on lock. You know what I mean? Is that what that's like, or is it somewhere a bit sort of in the middle between like you're having a good time but you're also directing traffic a bit?
I'd say more towards the second side of it. You're directing traffic. Radios are always a problem because we're airsofters and everybody loves them $35 bow fangs. Um, they have problems with interference, and we call it getting ear effed, is what we called it all the time, where it's just
Hmm.
going on in your ear the whole day, or somebody comes in and is hot miking from the squad channel or from the platoon channel that you're listening to, as well as your squad channel, and you can't hear your squad channel because the
Yeah.
platoon channel just keeps having interference, and it's really aggravating. It's one thing we've been looking into is higher quality radios for clear connections and digital, and be able to encrypt them and everything else like that. But that's a totally different side of it. You are directing more
Hmm.
traffic the higher up you go. It's also, it may appeal to someone more than it appeals to the average airsofter. For me, being able to tell my LNG gunners that I want them set up here and here, and that gives me the ability to have my assault fire team assault this building or this objective while we have support, uh, keeping people at bay or uh, distracting someone for them to be able to do their objective and be able to work that out as a team or as a game plan. That appeals to me. So the leadership roles appeal to me rather than being the guy kicking in the door or being the first one in the building, or, hey, I need to make this 20-yard sprint to get in that trench and then I can creep up on them. The leadership more appeals to me. But we've had guys at events where they're like, hey, this is my first mil sim. I don't know what I'm doing, but we're going to run this squad and we're going to do what we can. So it really can fall in anywhere.
Yeah, and what does that planning sort of look like to strategizing, especially like with your team members, like your not just like your team at the game, but like your Division Airsoft team members. What does the planning look like in terms of strategizing and maybe like practice or training or what have you leading up to an event like that? Do you do much of that?
We do touch on it a bit. A typical bit is playing together. Maybe we'll have one or two training sessions. I know there are other teams in Colorado that take it a lot more seriously. And there's a
Hmm.
team I know that practices once, if not twice a week, especially leading up to milsims, going through like last man, stacking on a doorway, feet as you transition through a door. You know, when you dig a corner going through, how to pie a corner going through a room, using bits and pieces, knowing how to use your blind spots. So you may be completely visible walking up on somebody, but if you took 3 steps to your left, you're in the blind side of a tree and they can't see you, and you're able to walk up 20, 30 yards before they're able to see you then. And all of a sudden now you're both being able to engage each other. So it's just practicing those things can come into play, or you can just wing it, get a group of guys together. Hey, everybody, this is the team name we're going to be associated with. We're going to go play this. Division is more based on the team aspect of it as a whole and using each other, because an individual will never be able to hold up to a squad. Very rarely will a squad be able to hold up to a platoon. There are instances where we have had to do that, and we have been affected based on the leadership in place of how to direct fire, where the LMGs go, where your SPRs or DMRs go, if you have your sniper or if you have your rifleman and your medic. Being able to figure out where those guys are and what they're supposed to do does make a difference, and that's part of that team camaraderie. Division takes it more seriously, but we're not. We understand that it's not a job. You're doing this for fun, and if you're going to lose that, you don't need to be a part of this then.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's a lot of value, I think, of just like playing, and that's how our team is really focused too. It's like, I like everybody on our team. We get on, we can have a beer or burger or whatever and just hang out. And when you start to understand the people as individuals, you can also understand sort of, or predict, I guess, what they're going to do on the field or what they like to do. That way you can arrange yourself accordingly. Like you're talking about, well, I've got these guys who like to do this role, and you can, align yourself for, on the day of. And it's interesting when you talk about teams that like practice like, twice a week leading up to an event and all this kind of stuff. Do you, for in your sort of estimation, how much of an impact do you think those really specialized skills have at a game like this? And I'm asking this question because, again, I don't know if I have those skills going into that kind of event, in a couple of months or several months. How much of a difference will having those skills make versus just having your good fundamentals and coordinating with your teammates like you guys do?
So if you're able to coordinate with your teammates and you have your basic fundamentals down, you're going to be totally fine at an event, especially if you team up with 5 to 10 other guys like you, you're going to be totally fine. When you try to critique and fine tune those motor skills, it's the same thing in my kind of principle with teching in airsoft. You're going to pay, and then the time and effort and maybe money you spend in a little extra gear or something like that to get 2 to 3, 4% more out of it. But for me in teching, that's worth it. And to some guys, the actual practicing and skills, it's worth it. Knowing how to shift your feet going through a doorway, knowing how to keep your chicken wing down, how to pie a corner, making sure that your foot is not outside your shoulder, making sure that when you do present, it's all snap at an instant. Those kind of things can make or break you, and that's going to separate you from that A tier to the S tier airsofter, because we're all BB SEALs out there. It can make a difference. And that goes back to the learning with the new guys who are coming out for their first time, teaching them to keep their chicken wing down, keep their forearm down, making your profile less, turning slightly sideways when you're in cover, how to peek around a corner to be able to see what's coming up on you. Those things make a difference and can either keep you alive on the field longer or give you the advantage in a one-on-one situation. So it can make a difference, I believe, but it's not necessarily needed.
Yeah, and I think, to use like the principle that, the concept that I use at work as well all the time, it's like you got to focus on the big stuff first, right? So if you're trying to learn to, how to pie a corner, for example, or trying to look at your feet or whatever, but you shoot and you have a chicken wing, or you're not bladed when you're behind cover, or like you're talking, you're not keeping your replica up when you're emerging from cover, like that's probably going to be more beneficial to a beginner or someone who's building those skills than the really specialized, how to breach a doorway or whatever. But there, you prompted something else that I think which is interesting. Like for people who are transitioning from like local events, regional events, and then going to these big events. And like I mentioned, like I haven't done a big event like this too. Like what are some of those like misconceptions that players that you've seen, that you've experienced from going from those, smaller events to these larger national scale events? What are some of those misconceptions that players might have that, you would try and dispel for them before they hit the field to help them out?
We actually went through that in the beginning with Division is, we're going to be able to run over you. We're going to be able to go all day. We're not going to have a problem with this. You're going to learn that real quick in the first hour or two. That's not what you do. You're going to have the guys at the beginning of the game. Everybody's super stoked. We were, and us older guys have learned that this is not a sprint. It is a marathon. Sprinting at the beginning of the game to be the first one to the middle of the field is not going to do you or anybody or your squad any good, because you're going to go down, and then your team's going to have to figure out how to get your medic up there to get you back up or pull you back or whatever. It's kind of detrimental, actually. Sticking as a unit is going to be a big factor. But your big thing we learned was, don't sprint this thing out. Don't go full bore 100% at the beginning. Give it 50%, 40% at the beginning, get to the field, and then it's your job with your squad leader is to listen to command, because they're getting information from other squads. What's happening around you? Where can you infill? Where can you make a difference? How can you be effective? And then that's when you try going a little harder. But you got to also keep in mind, you're going to get worn out, because when you do eventually die, you got to walk back to spawn. And we've been to a couple events where walking back to the FOB is a half-mile trek. And you're like, that's no big deal. Well, when you're carrying water on you and your gear and 7 mags and your replica, and if you run a tank rig in line or extra batteries, that's going to weigh you down a whole lot more than you think when you're able to go play for 10, 15, maybe 30 minutes on a weekend warrior game. And then you get to go take your gear off, slug some Gatorade and water, and 10 minutes, get back out there and do it again. No, you're playing the whole time. You're involved with airsoft the entire day. Whether you may be sitting back at FOB and regrouping and cooling off or something, or getting some lunch, you're still involved in the game. And then when you do deploy, there are times we've been out deployed for 4 or 5 hours, and you have to be conservative with ammo. You're not able to just spray and pray whatever you want. Your LMGs can't just go to town all the time. They're allowed their 3,000 rounds, and you're allowed your 7 mid caps. So ammo conservative mentality is essential. Knowing what you can and can't hit, being effective with your shots makes a huge difference. It's a different mindset from playing Weekend Warrior as opposed to going to a milsim.
Well, it sounds like a lot more of an endurance event compared to, like you were saying, like you get played, half an hour game. It's so funny, at the game we played literally yesterday, we played a half an hour game, and guys were like, man, that was a long time. Half an hour. So imagine now you have to be on the go. We ran an event at the start of the season that was a 6-hour continuous event, which for us is a big deal. And people were smoked by the 3rd hour. And to your point, like if you're running around, most airsofters are not endurance athletes. So like the time on feet is not going to work out in their favor. So you really need to be thinking about that. But I guess the other factor that sort of I'm thinking about is when you have people who are in their local communities, and sometimes the communities are larger or smaller. Like in our community, we have 40, 50 players, right? It's a big community for us, but that's not very big in other areas. That's fine. But there's tendency to think, oh, well, my community is not very big. If I go to a national event, everybody's going to be way better than me. Right. And yeah, so that's my question to you. Like, does that, bear itself out in reality?
Not in my experience. You definitely have those guys who come in and they're swimmer cut, they're broad shoulders. You're like, are these guys legit? Like, are they legit military? Can they do this all day? And then you talk to them, you're like, nah, you're just a goofball like me. It's okay. We went to Copperhead the first time, and we breached that house, lit it on fire, put out the fire, moved down the street. We were having problems with one of our LMG gunners, so worked with him on that, got it back up and running. And then we realized that we were being engaged from our flank to our left, the north, between us and where our team was. So we were with another squad at the time, and we asked them, hey, can you guys give us covering fire? Talking to 2 LMG gunners on that squad. Can you give us fire on that helicopter so we can bypass it to the south and get to our squad? And they said, sure, absolutely. Well, looking over their shoulder, I guess it was one of those new guys who didn't know what a hop-up unit was, because the guy wasn't shooting more than 75 feet. And we felt terrible, but you got to do that thing to make them better. You're like, hey, man, have you adjusted your hop-up? And he looked at me and goes, what's a hop-up? And I was like, oh, man, let me change your day. Popped his lid, adjusted a little bit, put it down, and he was shooting out to about 200. And he was just like, as I was running forward, he goes, thanks, man, this is awesome. So maybe made his event.
Yeah, really.
But you have guys who are first timers. Like we just went to Arsenal, 1,000-player event, and you had guys out there saying, "Hey, man, it's my first milsim. What do I need to do?" You're like, well, this is a big event for your first milsim, buddy. Like, here, you do this, 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 this. And you have guys from the very beginning, or you guys who've been playing 10, 15 years. You got
Yeah.
both sides of the aspects. And you do have your guys who think they're better than everybody, and you have guys who think they're not. So,
Yeah, that's been my impression just in general, talking to a variety of people from the Discord and stuff. And there really is, like, I think the small town mentality of like, oh well, we're no good because our community is not big enough. But your point is valid. Like, there are people like that all over, and they're attending these games. And if you attend one, well, you will be one of those people. But also on the flip side, I think if you have 1,000 players, whatever your community looks like, and you scale it up to 1,000, that's what you get. So if in
yeah.
your community you have like 50 people and one guy's a jerk, well then at 1,000 player event, you're probably going to find at least one jerk too, right?
Yeah.
But if in your community you've got like 30, 40 players who are like legit, friendly, best kind, that's also what you're going to find at, I would say, most airsoft events. Like the airsoft drama you see online is not a good reflection of what airsoft communities are like, and they certainly are not a reflection of the type of community that you guys are trying to or have started to change and create in your local as well, right? Which is super and super important.
Right. Kind of an article I read a while ago. You're going to see 100% of the negative, and you're going to see about 10% of the good. So all these negative cheater videos and stuff you see online is 100% of the bad, but you're only going to see maybe 10% of the good. So take
Yeah.
that into factor when you're talking about big events and things like that. More times you're going to have the good outweigh the bad.
Yeah, I mean it's so true. Like, you run a business, how many people are easily going to complain when something goes wrong, but not everyone who has a great experience is coming out saying, "Hey man, thanks so much. Like, that was great." So yeah, I totally
A lot.
appreciate that. Yeah. So I want to move on to more local games too, because I think so we're moving on to this. And one of the things I learned as I was doing prep for this episode is that um, the field that you play at, which is dynamic paintball and airsoft, initially it was only a paintball field. And it's through conversations with the owner that you were able to create a relationship with them to start looking at airsoft. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like?
Sure thing. We had Kiowa Creek out here, and we eventually had a issue with pyro. We had a gentleman come down from out of the city, and he brought actual smoke grenades from a fireworks shop, so not coal burning like Enola
Okay.
Gay is. And unfortunately, lit the field on fire, caused a big old ruckus with that. Some whole legal mumbo jumbo, insurance claims and stuff. The owner pulled the field back from us and said, "I'm not doing this anymore, guys. We're done." So we had to move on from there. We actually went to Dynamic initially, and we got to talk to the manager at the time, and he said, "Nope, we want nothing to do with airsoft. We got burned before by an individual, and we want nothing to do with it." So took it upon myself after that to talk to the manager and get a meeting set up with the owner who was running the field, who turns out was renting from a lady who owns the land. Sat down with them and got to bestow our opinion and insight into the industry of airsoft, of what the difference is and how that makes it different from paintball and a different avenue, and that there is a market for it. And it just blossomed from there and grew, and currently is what it is.
Right. And it's awesome to when you can take someone who has had a bad experience with airsoft and then sort of to be like, hey, listen, it's not like that, we're not like that, this is what we want to do. So you say that it's blossomed. What does that look like now? Like, how did it start, and where are you with that relationship? Like, I mentioned in the intro that you're doing like once a month, end of the month games, or sorry, a game day, if I'm understanding correctly, right? Can you talk about what that's like?
So airsoft started out, they gave us 1 day a month, and we were trying to figure out what day. And so we said, we're making it easy. It's going to be the last Saturday of the month out there. That lets them plan for paintball, lets them plan for events, lets us plan and when we're going to be out there and when we're going to have to commit to it. Started off with, hey, we'll run airsoft, but we need help to understand how to do this. So Division and I were getting involved and showed them how to operate a chronograph, showed them how to measure the energy on an airsoft gun. If someone has a problem, the typical 3 go-tos to fix. One is a jam BB, one's a dead battery, and the other one's, I don't know, give it to somebody else to figure out. So teaching him those things. And then we realized after playing, because we wanted to play it somewhere different, we noticed and started understanding that the guys running airsoft weren't invested in it as we were. So you were getting the lacklusterness of like, hey, 30 minutes between games, oh, we're going to go play for 5-10 minutes and then come off. And we sat down and had a discussion with the owner. Actually, Big Red Airsoft took the dynamic owner to dinner and explained to them, this is not what we need for the community. This is not what we want to do. How would you feel if we stepped in and ran Airsoft for you? And the owner was like, well, what are my guys going to do? And I was like, keep them on paintball, because that's what they know. And that is their want and drive, is they want to do paintball. Let them handle that. We'll handle Airsoft. And it has blossomed and grown since then. We started out with maybe 10, 12 players on a weekend, and casually or gradually we've gone +2, +3 on a weekend. Last weekend we had like 29 players. And it's a different atmosphere at Dynamic. It's family based, it's friendly, it's encouraging. And then the Airsoft group are these, full scope of them would be elite players capable of downgrading themselves to coach, mentor, and work with new people coming in. So you're not going to have these guys who are going to come out and just trash everybody. They're going to work
yeah,
with
it's
them and
not
try
fun.
to grow.
Yeah.
I've been on the receiving side of that, and it's not fun. And we stomp that out pretty hard when stuff like that does come up, where guys talking about how they're going to light these new guys up. Nah, we don't talk like that here. You don't do that.
Yeah.
This is a community, and we're going to grow it. And everybody who's come out says, this is the best Airsoft I've played. I'm going to be coming back. To the point where the owner has heard that and said, when can we go to multiple days a month? And we told him, you're not there yet. You don't have the player base yet. So
yeah, and it's interesting to me because you say like 29 players and stuff like that, and my assumption, and incorrectly, is like, oh well, this is in the United States, like great communities, they must get like 100 players plus per weekend, right? And to me, I'm like, oh, 29 players, like we get 29 players sometimes, right? Not very often,
right.
but we do. So it's like, oh, well, that's actually very similar to what we do. So I think the key thing, the reason I'm bringing this up is if you're in a community and you've got 20 players, like you're doing fine, guys. Like you're your best kind, as we say.
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah. So what I want to do now, not scripted, I'm going to rattle off a name of a game mode that you guys play, and I want you to tell me a little bit about what's the deal with this game mode, because I've heard a lot of really positive stuff about really unique game modes that you've run, but I didn't dig into them at all. I was just like, give me some names, I'm going to throw them out and see what happens. So let's start off and let's talk about Snitch. What is Snitch?
So Snitch is a game that takes a little while to explain to get into it when you're giving it to guys who are gonna play it. You have two sides. You essentially have like the cartel and you have the cops. And then we revised it recently, so you have two snitches. So two players that are identified in the very beginning. They're set aside. You take their rifles from them and you give them pistols. And you give them an unknown amount of ammo in a pistol mag. And they get that for the game. Principle being, they're protected by cops, right? Because you're trying to get them to trial. You're trying to make this so that they give their statement and you throw all these cartel guys under the bus. Cartel are trying to kill them. Game factor difference, snitches cannot be killed by bullets. So the cartel shooting them does nothing. The cops shooting them does nothing. Only way to kill them is a melee attack. So you have to have a melee weapon to perform a melee kill. You can't use the butt of your gun. You can't barrel stuff them. So that changes up the dynamic. You have to put a hand on them is what we've had to go to, because not everybody carries a melee weapon.
Yeah, fair enough.
Factor being, the snitch cannot move if a cop is not within 10 feet of them. And you have to take the snitch from one end of the field. I'm going to use my screen. You got to take him from one end of the field and get him to the other to be able to finish the game. Meanwhile, cartel respawns somewhere over here, and they're able to engage the entire map of where they need to. Cops, when they die, have to go back to their respawn and come back in. But a snitch can't die unless a cartel member does a melee kill on them. Now, to put a twist on that, there are a certain number of dirty cops, just like in real life. So factor being, at any point, you don't want as a snitch, you don't want anybody close to you, at least within 5 to 10 feet. But they need to be within 10 feet to move you. So you have to be able to tell them, keep your distance, or pop, you just killed a cop. So it's a whole different mindset. For the simple side, the cartel, you're just trying to get close and be able to take the snitch and eliminate them. The cops want to get the snitch to the end of the game and win the game that way. The snitch doesn't want to die.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the factor. And there's been some really cool interactments with that, and stories from players of like, oh, I was a dirty cop and I slipped in, but I got too close and they shot me, so I had to go respawn, and or vice versa, or someone lunging at the snitch and then popping them twice in the arm with double shots. It's been pretty cool.
That's awesome. That sounds like a really fun game mode. Okay. What about Tactical Ted?
Tactical Teddy Ted came from one of Big Red Airsoft's purchases. Purchased a lot of airsoft, broken guns, upgraded parts, pieces, and whatnot. Dug through the bins and found a teddy bear. And teddy bear, in that pile of stuff, there was a vest made for like a doll. So we put the tactical vest on the bear, and the movie Ted became Tactical Teddy Ted, or Triple T.
Okay, all right.
Tactical Teddy Ted, you have two sides you divide into, and the premise we have a problem with in airsoft in the community is it's always just go shoot each other. Like, no, give me something to do so I can win. Like, how can I win the game? Because a limited respawn means absolutely nothing. For me personally, and a lot of the division guys, there's no point in playing team deathmatch because you're just shooting each other. But Tactical Teddy Ted is hid on the field somewhere, like literally buried in the dirt, underneath a spool. Lift up a piece of plywood and put him under there. Put him on the top of a pylon or whatever, to where you have to like shoot him off to have him fall to be able to pick him up and win. When you find him, you have to take him back to your respawn point, and when you do, that's when you win. If you get shot while holding him, you have to drop him where he's at.
Nice.
Different variances in that. You can pick Tactical Teddy Ted up and turn around and just throw him backwards. But then he's flying through the air and everybody knows where he's at.
Yeah.
So it's just something different.
You should do rugby rules so you can only throw him backwards. You can't throw him forwards.
Right. See, that's something else you can come up with your own game now.
Yep. That's hilarious. What about Chiron? I guess it's Chiron. It's pronounced Chiron?
Yep. Chiron. It's based on the what do you call it?
The ferryman?
The old mythological bit of the boatman.
Yeah.
This one takes a long time to explain to people. You divide into two teams and everybody gets an armband. It's unlimited respawn, so pretty simple rules so far. There's a 5-gallon bucket placed in the middle of the field, on what you call the 50-yard line, the middle of the field, and the goal is to get your armband in the bucket. However, when you do put your armband in the bucket, you leave the field of play, aka your team gets weaker because you have one less gun on the field. So it's a wave game where people push forward and, you're yelling out tactics. Hey, I've got guys here, here, here. You shoot them out. They go back to respawn. You drop 2 or 3 armbands in the bucket from players. The player has to take it off, run up and put it in the bucket, and then they leave the game. Well, the 3 other guys on the field are still fighting against the original 6 to 10 guys that were out there. So they're going to get outshot and be pushed back to respawn. Then that team comes and drops some armbands in, loses players, and then it becomes an even Steven match again. So it's kind of that bit, and you'll have guys like yelling like, go, 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 and you'll have 5 guys run past the bucket and drop, 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 drop. And then their team's half the strength.
Yeah. That's a really interesting concept. Really, really cool.
You could be the last man standing versus 7 other guys, and it's like, good luck, buddy.
Yeah. So how do those games usually end?
Sorry, what were you saying?
How do those games usually end then? Is like 1v1?
So we've had them end in. We've never had a 1v1. We've had a 1v3. We've had a 3v5, and the team of 3 got some lucky shots. It was actually Chaz, a guy named Ryan, and Sam actually worked it out where the 3 of them pushed 3 or 4 back, and they used their blind spots creeping up to it and put their bands in the bucket and won. So
nice.
It all depends on who you are, and it doesn't matter if you're brand new or if you're really experienced. You're not going to do anything against 5 other guys.
You're doing a lot to build up Chaz's mystique on the Discord as well. All the guys are already afraid. Half of them are already afraid of him. So.
Oh man, I joined the Discord. He's posting all the time in there.
Yeah. All right. What about the nuclear football? What's that about?
So nuclear football is give me something else to do. So you can shoot people all you want. It really doesn't matter because they're going to respawn and come back. We've placed a literal football in the middle of the field, and you have to obtain the football. But the end of the game, if the football is on your half of the field, you lose. So when you get it in the explanation, you're allowed to, we have variants of it to change up the game formats. Sometimes there are no rules to it. You can pick it up and hold it as long as you want. You can pick it up, take it back to your base and defend it, and then put your rifle down and punt the football to the other end of the field if you want. But by the end of the game, if it's on your half, you lose. So you'll have guys who it'll be on a barrel in the middle of the field, and they'll go up and poke it, and it will fall just on the other side of the barricade that it's on, but it's on the enemy side of the field, so you're winning. Well, they'll pick it up, and they'll Peyton Manning throw it to the other end of the end zone, and then now it's deep in your territory, and you've got to go get it and get it out of your side of the field. It all depends on how we want to play it, whether you want them to hold on to it or not, and it changes how the game's played.
That's a really interesting concept, and I love this idea that you're sharing across multiple of these games around, like, deathmatch with respawns or unlimited. Like, you can do that, but ultimately, like, you giving players something else to do really changes the dynamic. Like, unlimited respawns is fine, and having set respawns, like, it's okay too. But I'm sure you have played tons of games like I have, where it's like you've given me lives, and it literally doesn't matter because
Yes.
I'm not going to use all of these lives, and I'm just going to my team and I are going to do really well, and we're going to crush the other team, or it's not going to be a factor because we're going to get completely smoked. Either way, like, the lives aren't really the factor. It just extends the pain, I guess, in some respect,
Yeah.
on either side. But I like this idea of, and we've done that sometimes for our games, but it's not as advanced as what you do, but like, okay, take this to this place or what have you, and then defend it. But yeah, I like this. And one of the things that I think is really important, we've talked a little bit about it throughout, but it's how do you keep airsoft fresh for players who are coming. I mean, you guys are playing once a month, when that's awesome, but there are people out there who at our local, for example, they're playing airsoft twice a week. They're playing on Thursday nights and they're playing on Saturdays. Like, how do you keep airsoft, for your money, how do you keep airsoft fresh for players who are playing really, really frequently?
For me, it's changing up the format. So one of the reasons I'm kind of, I guess you'd call it, singed in the community from my playing experience is the repetitiveness. The same thing, played the same way, on the same fields, with the same objectives or end condition.
Mm-hmm.
You'll go to some fields and it's the same 8 games every weekend, both days of the weekend.
Have you played at my local? Is this why you're saying this? Just
Hey,
kidding.
man. So that's a big thing we try to push is we're not going to, we'll play the same games, but we're not going to play in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So a big factor I'll put in there is how can you change things up to make it different? Just change the respawn points on a field. If your respawn points are here and here next weekend or whatever, make them here and here, and you will be astounded how different the game plays because the cover's different.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge change. Basically, that's really what it comes down to. You don't have to come up with these extravagant rules or new type of game. Just change the respawn points. We've tried pitching that to fields, like, hey, can we play it backwards? Instead of getting to the helicopter, can we get to this object over here? And they're like, done, we never played it that way. It's going to play the same way, just backwards. And it's really hard to get them to change up on that.
Yeah, definitely. But I think you're bang on. Like, we've done that once or twice before. It's like, hey, can we do it this different way? And if you have the ref who is willing to try it, is like, I don't know how it's going to work, but what's the worst that happens? It doesn't work, and we try something else. Sometimes you can discover some cool stuff. For your money, what's your favorite game that you love to run at your local? I mean, like, what is the game mode that you most enjoy?
I really like Chiron. Just the mental aspect, and there is no real leader to it. Everybody's got to be thinking. So you're not only playing airsoft, but you got to think through it. Like, hey, if those 3 guys leave the field, I'm in a really bad spot.
Mm-hmm.
Or, can we totally push through these guys and make it super easy for us to win? It's a thinking game. Another real favorite is a kind of push mechanism or a push game where you start in one corner, push to an objective, and then those defenders fall back. And it lets you play in multiple areas in different ways, but it keeps the game going. I can't tell you, Phil, how over I am of the 10, 15-minute games. I like the milsim side. I like playing for 20 minutes minimum. Let me go out there. I didn't fill these 7 mags up to go spray full auto for the next 10 minutes straight. Let me play some time. Give me some time on the field.
Yeah. And the more time you have too, I think that this is a part that gets lost for some players, is it's not just about it's a longer duration. You can do more with that time. Like, because you have more time, different tactics apply differently, right? If you give me 5 minutes to do something, it's going to look very different than if you give me 25 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever. Because just like running and taking that objective, yeah, if it's 5 minutes, sure. But if I take it in 5 minutes and then I've got another 25 minutes to sit on it, that's not
Right.
great, right? So I got to think through that and apply it differently. So yeah, I hear you there, and I agree as well. Like I'm a little singed too right now. Like we had a great time last yesterday, but at the same time, like I'm looking forward to actually trying some of these game modes that you've talked about, and changing stuff. And we're very fortunate that our refs are like, yeah, I don't care, man, just do whatever. Like, that's very much their mentality. They're like, as long as people are following the rules, people are having a good time, don't care what you do. But we're also very much like, every single weekend is, hey, we're going to do 2 village deathmatch games, and then we're going to go on the road, and then we're going to go in the woods, and then we're going to go back to the village for a couple of games, and we might go on D-Day, or we might go back to the road. That's how it is every week, like when we go. So I totally hear you. So the last bit that I want to talk about as we just wrap up this episode, I want to talk about some of the culture shift in your airsoft community that you've seen over the last few years. How have you seen the culture, the airsoft culture in your local community and stuff shift positively, primarily in the last few years as a result of some of the things that you've done?
I know from when I first started, being part of a team indefinitely puts you on a different plane of airsoft. You ran with these guys. People looked differently at you, that you either knew what you were doing, or those guys are just, they're bad guys. Nobody talks to them. They don't talk to people. They just like to shoot everything and dominate everything they can. Division has made a personal voted on choice to shift the mentality, especially viewing of Division, as we are not these military grunts that come out and just, that's all we do. We've tried to open up, be more approachable, watching our reactions and our mentality on the field. And I know in the past 2 years, there's been a vast change in that. We have little groups of kids coming up. When I say little, I mean like 10 to 12-year-olds coming up and talking to us on the field, asking if they can shoot our guns and stuff like that. And some of us say yes, and some of us say no based on different reasons, but trying to be more approachable, as we're not these big bad guys who are going to shut you down and ruin the day for you. Now, let me tell you, the Division guys, and I know there's a couple other teams who can too, give you a run for your money. If you are one of those bad guys and you're ruining the day, we can come up and put you in your place and ruin your day because you're making it bad for everyone else. But trying to make that cultural shift of, these guys are good, wholesome people, and they're not to be thought of as this negative entity that showed up at the field. It used to be, oh man, Division's here. Great. And we have since changed that to, we have the refs asking us, why haven't you guys played here in a while? And it goes back to that scenario of, we just don't enjoy the gameplay, man. Like, we've asked to change stuff and stuff doesn't, but we still try to once every 2 or 3 months go to every field. There's like 5 or 6 I can think of off the top of my head. If we're not busy or have something else going on, we try to play. We try to support Chaz and Sam and Ryan up at Rampart Range, which is a totally different aspect of airsoft, playing in the mountains. When we're playing at elevation at like 9,000 feet, it puts us at a different aspect of the game. And then going to your local fields, we have Flatacre Farms and we have Go Airheads. Trying to go there and still enjoy it and build the community is a big factor for what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and it certainly sounds like you're succeeding, man. And I really love it when I hear like what you're talking about, where teams are going from this like, oh God, great, these guys are showing up, to, oh great, these guys are showing up. Right? Like, they're, I made a video about this like years and years ago about like how to start an airsoft team and like what you should be hitting. Like, being approachable is just so important. I remember for our team, like, we made a conscious decision to put our names on our gear, like our names on our plate carriers, so people could be like, oh yeah, that's, it was our last names or whatever, but it's like, oh, that's, that's Warren, oh, that's Carew, that's, LeDrew, so that at least you have something to go on. You're not just a faceless, nameless person. It makes it easier to talk to you. And to your point, like, then you have younger players, especially for us at our local, there's lots of younger kids, 12, 13-year-olds, 15-year-olds who are, experiencing airsoft for the first time. The last thing you want is for them to be coming up against a brick wall of these, people who are look like they're trying, like full grown adults who look like they're trying
Yeah.
too hard, and like they're, it's beneath you to talk to people. Like, come on, man, like no way. So yeah, I really appreciate that, and I think that's something you absolutely, it's a feather in your cap, no question, no question.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Be mindful of the guy next to you. You have no idea what he's going through mentally, physically, in life. He could be using this as an escape, or he could be using it to ruin someone else's day. And just be mindful of what's going on around you. Keep your head on a swivel, especially with where the world is now. And try and keep airsoft positive. That's a big thing for me.
Yeah,
Let's put down all the bad about it and try and up the pros and denounce the cons.
absolutely, man. Couldn't have said it better. Kill him with kindness, as they say, right?
Yes, you know about that, don't you?
Yeah. Well, listen, Matt, thank you so much for joining me today. What a great conversation. Guys, if you're looking for some HPA help, if you're looking for some HPA parts, if you're looking for some HPA knowledge, hit Matt up at Big Red Airsoft. You can find him on the Discord. If you have any trouble getting through, we're going to put his links in the description box of the podcast, so you can check him out there. Again, Matt, thank you so much for joining us. This was a really awesome conversation.
Thanks, Phil. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, man. But again, guys, thanks so much for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Check out Big Red Airsoft. And that's all I got for you. We'll talk to you next week. Take care.